Thanks for joining us for another episode of DPC Radio. This episode was recorded live in Amsterdam at the Dutch PHP Conference 2012. For more information about the Dutch PHP Conference, visit our website, phpconference.nl.
Hi everybody, welcome to our presentation. This is, I think, the only presentation from a Dutch guy and a German guy. So we're actually battling out the European Championship here. I probably win. Welcome by separation of concerns, our presentation. You're ready. About me, my name is Joshua Thijssen. I'm a freelance consultant, trainer, developer for my own company. Development, I do it in PHP mostly, but I also do some Python, some Java, some C, even do some Perl. My email address, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to email me. My Twitter address, in case you want to follow me. I wouldn't recommend it, but if you want to.
So hi, I'm Stephan. I'm the German guy. Judging from my last name, you could probably guess I'm German. I live there. I run my own company there. The company is called BitExpert. We do web development and consultancy. When we started the company, I was one of the CEOs, and in 2007 we changed the company structure, and from that day on I'm being responsible for our research labs department, which basically means that I'm responsible for all the technology-based decisions concerning our client projects, our internal projects, or products that we do. So that means I'm the one who's been able to toy with a new cool technology all day long and is getting paid for that. I'm a long-time PHP developer. I started in 1999, which is always the point in the slide that really scares me. If you have any questions concerning this talk, this is my email address, my Twitter account. I'll be here tomorrow as well, and probably joining the speaker's dinner. Separation of concerns. That's quite an old topic. The first appearance is made in a paper published in 1974, a paper done by a guy called Dijkstra, which you probably know as he's Dutch.
Yay! 1-0.
And the paper is called On the Role of Scientific Thought. And Dijkstra wrote that it is what I sometimes have called the separation of concerns, which is yet the only available technique for effective ordering of one's thoughts. Now you might be wondering, how does that connect to software development? Because he's talking about his thoughts. It's probably getting clearer in one of the next slides. Let's have a look at what Wikipedia says about separation of concerns. Wikipedia defines it as the process of breaking a computer program into distinctive features that overlap in functionality as little as possible. Now what both quotes have in common is they are talking about focusing. So the basic idea of separation of concerns is that you take your big problem domain that you have and break it apart into small features, into smaller problems that you can tackle. And it's really important when you work in these smaller problems that you forget about the rest. Just focus on this one particular problem you're solving and do that one step at a time for all the problems that exist in your big overall problem domain. And how that will work is something that Joshua will show you right now.
This is just some crappy code written by a German guy. You've probably seen some code like this, or even you make it yourself. In a quick overview, it looks really simple. We have something that connects to our Facebook. It gets posts from our Facebook connection. It also gets some connection to Twitter, so it gets tweets back from Twitter. And in the end, it will echo all the posts that it has found. So this is a really simple way to get your Facebook and your Twitter messages and display them on your screen, or do whatever you want with it. Pretty nice, but if you are working with big frameworks and everything, you might have heard of Mvc Structure. And you notice straight away that there are like things done in different categories. Like the top part is more or less like a controller part. Here's where we get information. Here's where the thing is actually controlling stuff. The second part, and this is just a very small part, is like the view part. There we're going to have the data and we're going to output it. In this case, we just echo it, but we can have like systems like Twig to actually make nice output of it or do something else with it. But these are the two components we can actually describe from this block of code. Now, the problem with this is there's too much stuff going on. If you program like this, it might work, but it's very, very unstable. It's not really safe for changes. You can add changes. For instance, if you want to have another feed, you can copy-paste like a bit of code we saw earlier, and then copy it underneath. And it probably will work, but in a few months' time, you get like a huge list of code. And this is what the separation of concerns is about, to actually make sure that it's all manageable.
Now, how can we fix this? And I'm the one responsible for all the quoting, so I'll just add another one. There was a famous guy named Albert Einstein. He once said, make sure that you make everything as simple as possible, but not any simpler. Now, how can we map that to separation of concerns? Well, the goal is actually to establish a boundary. A boundary is any logical or physical constraint which delineates a given set of responsibilities. That basically means we are dealing with objects, we are dealing with methods, components, services. This really depends on the level of detail that you're looking at the problem. But we want to have these distinctive parts that cover a particular feature of your application. As Joshua said, there is the Mvc pattern, which is probably widely known in our field of application, and it deals with, on the top, the presentation layer, so all the view stuff is going on. All the UI rendering is done there. The presentation layer does not really know or care how to get the data from or how the data is being processed. This is done in the business layer. So there's all the business logic going on, gathering all the different data and probably changing that to be able to render it then in the view layer. The data actually is not coming from the business layer. The data is fetched or accessed by the resource access layer. So the business layer doesn't really care about how to get the data or where to get the data from. If you store your data in a MySQL database or in a NoSQL store or fetch them from a web service, this is completely irrelevant to the business layer. The business layer just says, get me the data. That's all I need to know. And these are the different boundaries. So the presentation layer never ever will access directly the resource access layer and vice versa. So you always have to go top down. This is really important. Now, how this reflects our program, or how can we change our example program, this is, again, something that Joshua will talk about.
Isolate functionality and break it apart. So that's what we should do now. So if we got a code, in this case, we basically make our code inside a Symfony bundle. This is Symfony 2, actually. Anyone uses Symfony 2? Why aren't you at Symfony Live? No, it's okay. Basically, every framework works, well, pretty much the same way. At least you can understand it. So what we actually did here is we got an index action where we have our system that's going to fetch the Facebook stuff. It's going to decode stuff and going to make items. And in the end, we've got an items array with all our feeds from, in this case, Facebook. Now, the second one is a Twitter one, still in the same index action. And in the end, we're returning an array of items. Now, in this case, in Symfony 2 knows that these items are needed for the view part. So it actually gets all the information in the controller and feeds it to the view part, which is outside of this action. So the only concern for this action is just fetching all the information for the view, but not doing the actual view itself. So yeah, in a sense, the only thing this thing does is fetching the data, not viewing the data. So that's like doing one responsibility at a time. This is like, the thing what you should do. But it doesn't stop there. So this all looks nice, but we have got a Facebook connector here, which is a block of code. We've got a Twitter connector here, which is a block of code. But in essence, our index action is doing three things. It's going to fetch the Twitter, it's going to fetch the Facebook, and it's going to merge all the posts together. So we can actually say it has three responsibilities, not one. So we can change that as well.
Right, before we continue actually, we step back one big step and just going to look at the overall problem. We are dealing with two social networks and we want to gather data from it. Now we abstract the stuff and generalize it, and we introduce an interface because interfaces are cool. They let you do stuff like, you implement the interface actually, and it gives you a general way of accessing objects information, and you're able to hook up as many classes as you want. When they all implement the interface, you exactly know how that stuff should work. So the interface basically acts as a contract. In our case, the contract looks like this. We have a connector interface, which has exactly one method, get latest posts. And as you can see in the doc block comment, it will return an array. So this is our contract, and all the classes that implement the interface has to fulfill that contract. So anywhere in the code, I would call the get latest posts method. I expect to get an array back. Now we take the functionality of the Facebook connector or the Facebook part and extract that and create an own class, which would look like this. So we have the class implements the connector interface. So we fill out the get latest posts method with the respective code, and that's it. That doesn't really look nice, actually, because there's a lot of stuff going on. You probably have not really a clue what's exactly going on, except the method name would tell you that it does the fetching of the latest posts. So we should go one step further and introduce more and more methods. So it could, in the end, it could look like this. If you look at the get latest posts method, it's quite clear what's going on. You first fetch the access token, which then you pass to the read posts method, which itself returns or reads the posts and returns them to the callee. Now in the get access token method, we just simply fetch the access token from Facebook and just going to return it. So separation of concerns doesn't only mean that you have to have these multiple classes, each responsible for one particular thing. It also affects the methods that you can introduce. So the basic idea is to filter out small pieces of functionality, put them into its own respective methods, and just going to add that and call these. So it's really important. Step away.
Just stay there.
Oh, it's really important that you have a look at the methods and make sure that each of the methods have exactly one focus or one responsibility. That really helps if Facebook decides to change the way the communication works. Let's say they decide there is a different algorithm behind the access token. In the next version of their API, you just need an MD5 sum of the Facebook handle, the Facebook ID. So what we can do in this case is we can extend the original Facebook connector, implement the new getAccessToken method, and the rest of the code does not really care about that change. So it's really easy to extend existing functionality or override them without being able to cut and paste big blocks of code and making the necessary changes.
So what we got is if we implement our interfaces and we have a get latest post, our method or our action would actually look something like this. Instead of the big block, which we still do on Twitter, we actually have a Facebook connector, and we just say get the latest posts. So in this case, the only thing it does is it fetches the latest post. It doesn't care how it does it. It can do it by the old API, but if there's a new API, it can do it by the new API. This function does not care about that. So we can do the same thing with Twitter as well. So we got the same contract, the same interface. So only thing, get latest post. And if it is Twitter, if it's Facebook, if it's like any other social media, we can just implement it here, implement get latest post, and still return items to our view. So now we have like a really sweet and small index controller or index action in our controller that does like everything we wanted instead of a huge block of code. So in the end, this will improve testability, because right now we can just take and isolate our Facebook connector, test it. We can take and isolate our Twitter connector and test it as well. So this actually, you are able to unit test stuff like this. The other one, the big block, isn't. Again, it will reduce tight coupling, because right now we can use things like dependency injection, which he will talk about tomorrow, to actually decide on which kind of feeds do we need to have. We said we want Twitter, we said we want Facebook, but maybe we have other ones, or maybe we want to do dynamically. So we can do that with the help of dependency injection. So in this case, we aren't bound to just what's there in the code. We can decide on the fly, or we can decide through configuration. Also, component reuse, because right now, if we need Facebook or tweets or anything, we don't have to write our new classes for that. We can just use the Facebook connector, because nothing says that we can use the post just for outputting it. We can do it for all kinds of other stuff. So component reuse will be increased.
Now the million-dollar question, why should I do it? Well, there are a couple of points why you should do it. First of all, you get rid of code duplication. What happens in the original example if you want to get the Facebook post somewhere else in the code? You would copy and paste the code, which is not the best thing that you should do. Putting it out into a separate class or whatever and just going to call it is basically the better approach, because you always should keep in mind only deleted code is good code, because you don't get any bugs in it. Second, the whole application becomes more stable and more easy to understand, right? If you try to remember the example at the last page that you showed, it was quite understandable what's going on there, right? You created these Facebook objects, you called the get latest posts methods. So even if you have no clue what the method internally does, the method speaks for itself. So even if you've got a new dev on your team, it's quite easy to follow what's going on. If you keep this in mind and create these objects that have this focus on the single concerns, it's quite easy to find the exact spots where you change or where you should change the code if you need additional functionality, right? So we have one class that is responsible for the Facebook stuff. It's quite easy to know if anything would change, where do I have to put the code in this Facebook class. And as Joshua said, this really increases the reusability of the components. I have a general class that I can call anywhere in my application, which contains all the logic that is responsible for talking to Facebook or talking to Twitter. I just reuse it all over the place, and if there is a bug, I'm just going to have one place where I have to fix the code.
How many of you are thinking that this is a good idea? I should implement this in my own code. Okay, that's good. To be honest, even the big frameworks out there aren't always compliant to this, aren't always using this. How many of you have actually used or tried to do something with a framework and it turns out it can't do it, so I need to extend something from it, but it turns out extension of that would be like basically copying and pasting a complete class over and just change one line? Too many. It's not, you know, that's the biggest problem. And if you actually apply separation of concerns in your own code, that will not happen, at least not as much and not as often. So if you do stuff like that, it normally means the stuff you are using is broken. So you should, if you are able to refactor it and use smaller methods that only does one thing, then you can actually use that thing and modify it, but not care about all the rest that's there. And normally the big frameworks, some of them are okay, but some of them also don't really do that properly. So how do we separate it ourselves? How can we do it? Well, we showed you already. But what we did was like horizontal separation. We separated the presentation layer from the business layer, from the resource access layer. So we got like a view, and that could be Twig, that could be PHP, that could be something else. And we saw the resource access layer, which was like the Facebook connectors, and we had like sort of business layer as well. In Symfony 2, you can actually see the separation if you look at the directory structure. So you got your controller, you got your views directory. Business layer is not in there, but pretty much you can maybe say that your entity classes are like your business or domain layer. But still, the horizontal separation is pretty much present in this directory structure. And the same applies for Zend and all other frameworks, pretty much, that does MVC. Now, you can do it also on a big, well, a more global level. So not only looking at your application, but looking at like the big picture, where you pretty much have a service interface layer. If you have the next slide, this is, I think, more clear. So we got like web servers, and all those web servers need to make calls to a Solr search service, to a RESTful API, and the RESTful API will make a connection to our data store, for instance. From the web server's point of view, it doesn't care that's a data store there. It only needs to talk to the RESTful API, and the API doesn't care that there's a Solr search engine, and it doesn't even care that's a data store underneath, because it could be like separate data stores, and the data stores could be MySQL, could be CouchDB, could be something else, could be even another RESTful API. Doesn't matter. So, you know, isolation works on a global level as well. So if this is your infrastructure, this is pretty much what you do as a separation of concerns on an infrastructure level, which is pretty much the same thing we do on code.
And the good thing is in this example that if you need more MySQL servers, you just put them in, and the front end doesn't really care, because the front end doesn't. Can you hear me? Yeah, sorry.
I don't want to.
Right. So the front end doesn't really care about the MySQL stuff, because the front end is just talking to the REST API. So having that, it's quite easy to scale if you need to. So in addition to this horizontal separation, there's another type of separation that's called vertical separation. And vertical separation, we are talking about modules. That means taking your big application and breaking it apart into logical modules. Let's say if you're kind of e-commerce application, you have your order management, which could be a module, you have your customer management, which could be a module, you have your product management, which could be a module, and you can let each of these individual modules developed by different teams. You probably could outsource the development of such a module, and just at the later stage, just going to integrate it, because each of these modules is independent. It works on its own. Again, in the Symfony directory structure, it would look like this. So a module in Symfony language is a bundle. Beneath your Acme application, you have the admin bundle, the products bundle, the customer bundle. Each of the bundles is independent on its own and just going to working.
So you can actually combine those two, the horizontal and the vertical, and you get something like this. So every bundle we have has got its own presentation layer, has got its own business layer, has got its own resource access layer. So in this case, you have separated everything from each other. So the presentation layer of your admin bundle doesn't care anything about the presentation layer of your customer bundle, for instance. This is what makes it that you can use bundles or modules or whatever into other applications. But how many of you actually succeeded in having written an admin bundle and used that same admin bundle on other projects? There aren't that few. There aren't that many there. Most of the time, like your admin bundles or whatever you have are like too tight coupled with your application. How many of you, if you use Symfony, use the FOSS user bundles for logging? It works every time, because the only thing you have to do is, you know, drop in a bundle, and then you automatically have like all things you need to do for users, like logging in, logging off, sending activation emails, forgetting passwords. All stuff is there, but it only cares about users. It doesn't care about that you use things like this kind of mailer, or like this database, or this kind of, you know, API calls, or whatever. So bundles like that are like really, really separated and all contained in their own little module. And if you make your own bundles like that, then it might not be so troublesome to get your admin bundle or your customer bundle into other projects. which is like the code reusability, which we always say we want to have it, but never really get it unless we copy and paste everything. So yeah, in the end, you get it like the admin bundle. So you see the admin bundle, product bundle, customer bundle. It's like the horizontal ones. And you get the controller resources. Well, there should be like entities or whatever on the vertical ones. But yeah, there's another thing. What people really say, how to deal with things like security and logging aspects. Because if you want to log something, you might want to log it in every part of your application, not only in your data abstraction layer or your resource abstraction layer or maybe in your business logic. You want to do it everywhere and you want to be ready everywhere. Well, this is where aspect separation comes into play. And as you see here, we got different aspects, the gray one and the orange one. Yay, orange.
Just for you.
Just for me. But it's used everywhere. So in the resource access layer and the business layer, we have an orange one. And we have got the gray ones in every layer. So there are many ways to actually do that. But to be honest, I think this is the time that everybody needs to get out a mobile or laptop and just say, overheard, PHP is not ready for aspect-oriented programming. Because it really isn't. It's really, really hard to get stuff like this going. There's one really nice example, which is the flow tree, which you probably have been to the talks already and the tutorials. And what they actually do here is they want to have logging inserted before we're going to delete something. And they do it with annotations. So what you see here, we got a logging aspect, which is just a class of something we want to use. In this case, it's going to say, okay, I want to do logging before we're going to delete a product. And this will actually pretty much like inject the logging function before you call the delete. So in your code, you can call the product delete, but it will actually call this logging function first and then do the delete. So you can it's not dynamically, but you can just say, okay, I want to log on certain points in your application without actually do the code. This is really a nice trick. I heard this morning another awesome trick where they actually override classes. So if you have like a class name, they can override it by hijacking the autoloader, which is like a really awesome way to do it. But yeah, all of these are pretty much hacks, because again, PHP is not really ready for aspect-oriented programming, which is a shame, because if you could do stuff like that, that would be absolutely awesome, and it would really help separation of concern much, much more, and it will help frameworks and the stuff we do every day much, much more than it does now. But things like this in flow tree and type of tree, that's actually really, really awesome.
But you know, with great power comes great responsibility, so you have to be careful what you're doing.
With PHP programmers, we can do anything.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's say you have this big application, you have all your different components in there, which focus on their own concerns. You have to be careful how to establish the dependencies between these different components. There is a saying that less generic components should depend on the more generic ones, so that you're able to exchange them. Or, as Uncle Bob said, the high-level modules should not depend on the low-level modules. Both should depend on abstractions. This would allow us to inject or exchange implementations on runtime and making our components even more flexible. What do I mean with that? Well, let's say we have this vertical separation, this one module here that just kind of focuses on some kind of user management. And you need to find a way to contribute something to the presentation layer, like we want to have some kind of user interface component added to the existing view layer. Now, what you could do is you could extend the existing view classes and implement the logic to handle that stuff. But in that case, this module is not aware of your changes, right? Because your changes lives outside of this module. And the question is, how get we the stuff into it? And it's a pretty easy way to do that. We call it inverting of concerns. So you have your presentation layer somewhere else, write the UI component, and push it back in the presentation layer of the original module that you want to modify by using the terms of dependency injection. Now, dependency injection is really awesome for that, right? You configure all that stuff somewhere else, and your framework handles all that for you, gathering the objects together, wiring everything up, and returning the configured objects. So in this case, you could have an array of user interface components, which would then somehow get executed or rendered within the page, and thus you could easily add new functionality if you want to. Dependency injection on a large scale is also some kind of separation of concerns. In dependency injection, we separate the creation of the object with the fact that the object knows exactly what it's doing or what it's supposed to do. The idea of dependency injection is that the object itself should not be responsible for gathering its own dependencies, right? So you have something, a different component in your framework that is responsible for creating the objects. The object itself should not know how it gets created, which dependencies get injected. It simply should not care. It's just going to focus on the business logic that the object is supposed to do.
Yeah, that sounds complex. I think people should just go visit your talk tomorrow about DI.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So let's recap what we've done. So the benefits, first of all, facilitate reusability. If you're going to write your own framework, I'm not suggesting you should, but yeah, do it just to make sure that you know how to fail. Make sure that make reusable components. Try to see, okay, if I just get rid of it, is it easy to get something back in place? Is it separated? Are the concerns separated? The second one, make sure it's maintainable. Even if you know that you're going to leave your company the next week, think about the other guy and that he knows where you live. Because he will come and visit you during the night.
Except he's German, so you don't care.
Well, let's not go there. No, but yeah, it's, make sure it's maintainable. It will increase your code quality. It will make sure that you can unit test stuff. It will probably make sure that your code complexity isn't that complex. It makes sure that probably your mess detection will say, well, I'm pretty okay with this kind of code. So it will increase your code quality. Yes, you will get more classes, you will get more files, but that doesn't mean your application will become, more of a mess. Having everything in one single file does not mean that your application is really, really great, unless it's a FAR file. That's pretty much okay. So it increases your code quality. It enables you and everybody else to understand the application. It says here, everyone, that includes yourself, because in 2 weeks' time, you have no idea what you was writing. You probably think, was I writing this on crack or something? Yeah, make sure that you understand it. And it's not only about documentation, because even if you write like the most awesome documentation, make sure that your code by itself is self-documenting. This is really important, and this is something you gain automatically. It allows developers to work on components in isolation. If you make sure that your presentation layer doesn't do anything with your resource abstraction layer, you can have 2 teams working parallel on both your resource abstraction layer and your components layer. You can work all the data in between, that doesn't matter, but in the end it can come together and it should fit like perfectly. Well, best case scenario, because we know it doesn't always work like that.
But you get no conflicts when both people committing the code. So
no, you shouldn't. So this makes it more easy for you to work in isolation, and it can mean like having multiple sprints at the same time. Doesn't really matter, but it makes your life much easier. I think we're pretty much done with the separation of concerns. It isn't really a that hard topic, unfortunately, because nobody really implements it correctly, which is a shame. Are there people who have like questions, or like, you know, I do stuff like the first slide with a big lump of code. Anyone?
I have a question about when you said that PHP is not ready for aspect-oriented programming.
Oh, that's gonna haunt me.
And,
Delete.
well, actually, I have two questions about that. First is that I didn't understand the code snippet. I didn't understand what was happening there.
Do we have time? Can we go?
Yeah,
back?
sure.
And I thought we have traits now and closures, so we start across classes.
Yeah, this is well, they're all like things we can use or abuse or misuse. But what we actually want to do here is just have a function that's going to delete something, and you want to log that you have deleted a product. In this case.
Yes, but I don't see the delete call.
No, but that's the neat thing
You
about
don't
this.
see the delete call because this wraps around the delete call. Like somewhere in the code, some parts of the code is calling the delete method on the product, and this log function is wrapped around it and executed first. So we don't call here the delete method.
As far as I can see, no matter what method you call the product, it will always say that you are removing the product. That's what I read from it.
No, we just do it when we call the delete method. You see the add flow before annotation, which would say call this log method when the method is acme products model delete.
Okay.
So
that comment is actually being parsed by the...
it's not a comment, it's an annotation. That's a huge difference.
Can you explain how this annotation works, or is that beyond...
Yeah, so this is part of the core of Flow 3. So they analyze this doc block comment. Actually, they analyze the doc block comment of this whole class. They see there is the aspect annotation there, so they know it's something special. Then they analyze the methods in it, and they see we have a log method, which should be called before the particular other method. And they do a lot of magic in the background. I do not really know exactly what's going on there. They generate a lot of proxy classes and stuff like that, so they copy your own code and somehow change it. If you want to know the details, talk to Robert. Yeah, but it just somehow works.
So this stuff only works in Flow, or...?
Yeah, in
yeah.
this case, this is just for flow. So that's what I'm saying. Like, there isn't anything in the PHP core itself that makes use of this. It would be really awesome to have it here. It probably will divide PHP developers again, people against it, people for it. So it's not in there, but we're gradually going to that direction. So this will be in there. I don't know when, but it will be there. But not yet. So you can't use it yet. So this is why we need to do stuff like this. And this is only in Flow 3, but I suspect more of this will pop up very soon anyway, because this is like really the way we are actually going right now. Yes?
Well, since Framework 2 implements events to do just this, it seems to be much simpler than compiling...
To be honest, I have not looked at Zen Framework 2 yet, so I don't know. I have to talk to Matthew about it, if this is the same. I'm not 100% sure that it's...
You would subscribe...
Yeah, okay, but that's then the system... Okay, but then the system will actually fires events. So it's like still the system has to do stuff. Here it doesn't. It's just like a proxy class. As soon as it calls delete, something else is done for it. It looks the same, but it works differently internally. But I get your point, yeah.
In this case, the delete method itself, it doesn't need to do anything at all, right?
No,
Right.
it just calls the delete after it done the logging.
Yes, but you don't need to annotate the delete method that, okay, I want to allow aspect.
No, I don't. I think you can do annotations on the methods as well, but I don't know Flow 3 that
But then,
good.
do you ever use anything but, well, logging is really more like debugging actually. I mean, it is of course part of the code.
Everything what is an aspect you can use for this.
But do you think it's a good idea to use anything other than something like this, like logging, to really just inject some code really somewhere else in your application?
Well, if you look at other languages, then they're pretty much based on this type of system. No, you're not going to do that for everything, you know.
Something at all. I mean, like actually something that's
Like what you could do with that is implement some kind of security layer. Like you could say, if the logged in user is X, don't delete anything, just going to return. I mean, this is something that you could implement there as well. So.
To me, there would feel like if you were basically working with the delete code and it doesn't work, why? And then you have to do all the way
it has drawbacks. Gets more complicated to debug, obviously. Yeah. So you should not overdo it, or at least when you do, provide the necessary logging information that you can easily spot what's going on.
Yeah. Are there any other questions? Preferably not about aspect-oriented programming. All right. If you have the last slide,
yes.
Our presentation up and joined in. Unfortunately, you cannot rate me separately from the German, but that's okay. Yeah, so please do rate our joined in talk, or at least our talk on joined in. And with that, I would like to thank you.
Thank you.
DPC Radio is a production of iBuildings. The materials presented are copyright of the speakers. This episode is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 2.0 license. iBuildings is a full-service web development company specializing in PHP development. For more information on how we can help you with your next web project, visit our site at ibuildings.com. Thanks for listening, and we hope you'll join us again for DPC Radio.